Alright guys, so I really haven't had this truck on camera too much since I started my channel, but it's been a great truck. But I do have to fix a couple things right now. The most important thing is that I need to fix the transfer case. It's totally slipping. The chain is totally loose. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I got some ice coming up here. There's a big hill. If I go slow enough, I can't make it up without four-wheel drive. So I'm in two-wheel drive right now. I'll switch it to four-wheel drive. It doesn't slip yet, but as soon as you need it to have some power in the front, that's when it slips, so watch. It does give you a little bit of traction because it's not completely slipping, but that's what it sounds like. You really don't want to drive it like that too much. You end up with a bunch of metal shavings in there. So I've done a bunch of transfer case work before. I've done at least 2 different transfer cases where they had a slipping chain, so this shouldn't be any big deal. I got the parts already, so let's go put them in. So there's not a lot of room in this garage, but it's enough to do this work in the cold weather. So this will be the first project on this new bench. I have not fixed anything on this bench yet. So the first thing I did was drive this up on ramps. That definitely makes it easier to take the transfer case out. I doubt that there's any fluid at all in here anymore. So you can see there's barely any fluid in there. So that was definitely leaking a lot faster than I thought it was. So I'm not gonna lie, I haven't checked this transfer case fluid in probably 3 or 4 months. But the last time I checked, I usually check it like 3 or 4 times a year. And I have had to put fluid in it lately. So I should have checked it a lot sooner. So let's get this transfer case out of here and see if we can salvage it. I've done plenty of rebuilds on transfer cases. They're all about the same process. So the first thing I want to do is take off the rear drive shaft. So that's all you got to do on the rear side of the transfer case. So now let's go up to the front. We'll go ahead and disconnect the front drive shaft and the linkage. You also got to remember that if you take your rear drive shaft off, this truck is a 5-speed manual, but if you had an automatic, and you had it in park, then it could roll away. So you definitely need to make sure you put your parking brake on, and if that doesn't work, you got to chalk it up or something. The second problem that we're going to address with this truck is I have a massive oil leak all of a sudden. I'm not sure what it's from. Looks like it's coming from the front of the motor, and it's leaking a lot. It's leaking everywhere. So that's all the oil that you can see here. So it's kind of hard to see where the oil is coming from on the transfer case. But we're going to check the seals. I got a seal kit, so we'll make sure we get all the seals taken care of. And I also have a U-joint in the front here that needs to be replaced pretty badly. So we'll get that too. So the next thing I'm going to work on is unbolting these bolts here for the front drive shaft. And on the other side here, there's a slip yoke, so you can just send it that way, and it'll take it right off that flange. So if you weren't doing anything to the front drive shaft, you could leave it just like this and take the transfer case without taking off the front drive shaft. But in this case, since I need to replace a universal joint right there, I'm going to take the whole drive shaft out. This is a T40. Pull this sensor wire, pull this tube out of here. So now the only thing you have left is the 6 bolts that mate the transmission to the transfer case. So what I like to do is remove the bottom 4 nuts on here, and then the top 2 I'll loosen up, but I won't take them all the way out. And then you got to make sure you got something underneath the transfer case. It's probably not going to fall out, but I guess if you shimmy it just right, it could. So it's kind of dangerous if you don't put something underneath of it before you take all the nuts out. So I got the bottom 4 nuts off, so I'm going to crack loose the top 2. Maybe until it's even hand tight. So you got the one on the top there. All 4 of the bottom nuts are taken off. The top 2 are to the point where they're hand tight. Most of the time when I take out these transfer cases, they're so light that you can just put your knees underneath of it and then take out the last 2 nuts, and then you just pull it out by hand. I have used a transmission jack before, and I have one here. I'm not even going to worry about using it though. It's just really not that heavy. The transmission's a lot heavier, but the transfer case is just not that heavy. Once you get this on the table, the first thing you got to do is take this rear cone off. These bolts right here have to come off, and there's going to be a sealant on it, so it's going to want to come out hard, so you got to kind of pry it off. I'm going to replace this seal, but I'm not going to bother with it right this second. I'm going to take the pump. This right here is the pump for the whole transfer case. It takes the fluid from the bottom and brings it up and circulates it. So I'm just going to take this little tube off of it first. So now it's time to take and split the cases in half. So this rear half right here, you take this off with all these bolts right here, and then there's this locking ring right here. So we just got to take that out, and then this whole thing will slide right off that shaft. So right now it's in two-wheel drive. You can see how much slop there is in that chain. It's in two-wheel drive. So if the transmission was spinning like this, it would spin the rear end, but it's not spinning the front end, see? So let's put it in four-wheel drive. So here's the magnet. You know, I'm really surprised that there's not a lot more shavings on there, because I've had to drive this thing for like a week, and every once in a while I need to put it in four-wheel drive, and it makes the most god-awful noise, but I just didn't have the time to get this fixed until now. I was thinking there was going to be a ton of shavings in there, but I guess not. So we'll check the bearings, we'll check the seals. Well, we're just going to replace any seals. I'm not even going to check them. That's how easy it is. So there's the old chain. Here's the new chain. Let's see how much it's stretched. And it's stretched because it wasn't lubricated properly. That was 100% my fault. Should have checked it earlier. And that's always the case with a stretched chain. That's always because of a lack of lubrication. One thing right off the bat I want to check is the shift forks. Sometimes they have little nylon guides on them that they wear right out. These right here. But these seem to be in good condition, so that's good. That one seems to be in good condition. All these points on here seem to be good. Spline seems to be good. This nylon piece in here, it only slides on the outer part, not the inner part like the other one does. And it's all evenly worn. So I don't see any problem there. If you look inside of here, you can see it looks to be in good condition. None of the teeth are worn. I don't see any shavings. This bearing doesn't seem to have any excessive play. It's got just enough to expand when it's hot and be good. That's one of the seals. I don't think that was bad though. But since we got a new one, we'll put it in. Planetary gears seem to be in good condition. Bearing on the inside seems to be fine. So in order to get this piece right here, it's like a rider for the fork. There's two dowels that are spring loaded that catch it on the top and the bottom, so you gotta retract them both at the same time just to be able to push that back. And they have like a little hole in the top of them, so you can take something like this and just push it down and it centers it right in the hole in the top. But you almost have to have like 3 hands to do it. Alright, so now that seal is replaced. I want to clean all this junk out of here. The fluid is really burnt too. Surprisingly not a lot of metal shavings, but definitely very burnt and dirty. This is not like a transmission, so it's not super critical that you get every little speck out, but there's no reason not to at least try to get most of it out. Alright, so now we're ready for reinstallation of all the components that I took out. This is the fork that engages it in either low or high. The other fork is what engages it from 4-wheel drive into 2-wheel drive. This one either engages or disengages from the planetary. So when this is all the way down, that means you're in low. You can see how slow the planetary is moving. Then you move it up to the top. I've had at least 2 different transfer cases that I rebuilt where these went bad. They just totally wore down to the point where it was metal on metal contact, and it actually wore down the fork itself. I had to replace the fork and get new nylon inserts with it too. In this case, this transfer case was saved before that happened, so that's a good thing. So let's put this back together now. You pretty much have to have this in the right position, which I can't remember correctly, but I think it's in low right now, to be able to put that dowel inside of the insert right there. If you have this selected in the wrong position, it won't allow you to get it in there in the right angle. So that's in there. So now that I put it in that other position, now it can't fall out. So this fork, together with this fork, rides on this shaft, and this shaft goes into the back side of this transfer case. So you have to line up this shaft with here and the back at the same time. Now you can put this in. Now you can put the chain back on with the sprockets here. And so you can see the chain is a little bit loose right now, but that's because the final position of this shaft is actually going to be like that. Once the housing is on, it's got a bearing here, and it centers that so that it tightens up. So I'm going to put these snap clips in here.
No, it was out. Wasn't that bad.
No? Because I imagine it.
It's a little colder than it is in here.
So put that back in. Now it's just a matter of scraping down the 2 halves, making sure it's nice and clean on the flange here, and then put it back together. So one last thing I'm going to check here is this pump strainer. Blow that out with compressed air. Sometimes it clogs up with a bunch of stuff on there. So you should be able to see through it. So now I'm ready to put these two halves together. So I always use the right stuff on here. This is great because you don't have to wait for it to set up before you torque it. You just put it on and torque it. That's it. If the guy that rebuilt this the last time used this instead of whatever he used, or if he had just waited for it to set up before he used it, then I wouldn't be having this problem right now. Guaranteed. So when I put this on, this spring stays here, and this little shaft here goes into here. And basically, between that and these two dowels right here, that keeps everything lined up perfectly. So as I'm putting this on, I'm going to push this shaft over just a little bit because that's where it needs to go. So I like to put a nice thin layer, about an 1/8 inch thick, around all the bolt holes. Put this snap ring back on here. You kind of got to pull the shaft out to get that snap ring in. Always a good idea to triple check everything. So now that I've got it back together, again I'm going to check it before I even put the tail housing on. So right now it's in 4-wheel drive high. That should be 2-wheel drive. So then one click over should be neutral. That's neutral. And then one more click should be 4-wheel drive low. You can see the reduction is working. See how fast I'm spinning it here, how slow these are going. That's in 4-wheel drive low. Alright, so now that we've confirmed that, we can put this tail housing on. Another thing you want to check for is the pump. So there's another seal right here in the pump. Pull that out, take that seal out, put a new one in. It's a little bit tricky to put this pump back in. because you got to get that through there. So you got to kind of bend it around. So now you can put the tail housing on. Just like that. So I broke off these two tabs. These are for removing this cone. I don't know what this guy used to seal this up last time, but I've never done that before. I just broke both of these off trying to pry that off of there. But that doesn't really matter. The only time that even matters at all is when you go to take it off again, and I can manage it without those. This is cast aluminum. They're not very expensive to get a new one. So I'm going to put this together first, and then I'm going to take this seal out. It's just easier that way. There was really nothing wrong with this seal, but no reason not to replace it anyways. That's actually a common seal to fail, this one in here. This outer one's just a dust seal, but this one actually holds the fluid in. And there's also a bushing right there that can get pretty worn out sometimes too when you get low on fluid. It's got a couple scratches on this one, but I'm not going to worry about it. I've had it to the point where there was no bushing left and the transfer case still worked. Anytime you need to put fresh fluid on something, use ATF plus 4. I just want to dabble a little bit on there so I'm not putting it in dry. Get some on the inside too. I just happen to have this extra outer race here. It works good for a driver for this. I'm going to put a little fluid on the inside here, just so that when you put the drive shaft on it, it'll slip right in there. There's this seal right here. It's not leaking, but I'm just going to put a new one in anyways. Just hang on a second. So this is ready to go back in the truck now. Go ahead and hook this hose back up. Hook this linkage up. Try to hook this sensor back up. This sensor is for the speedometer. I'm not going to put the front drive shaft on yet because I know I need to put a new U-joint in it, so I'm going to do that now. When you get it far enough off one side, then you can take the cap off. In this case, actually, you can take both caps off. So I'm at the point now where I want to get this drive shaft taken care of. So there was one universal joint on the front that I wanted to replace. It was this one right here. I already split it apart. And what I noticed here, after I took this universal joint off to replace it, I got looking around at the ball right here, the centering joint, and I realized that it needed to be replaced. So I took it out and I saw the pin here is kind of oblong shaped. So on the other end of it, on the yoke here, this piece goes in here, and this is not too bad, but it's all like misshaped. I don't know if you can see it, but inside there's that little like step up right there on this side, but on this side you can't see it. It's gone. And I think this will still work in here because it still fits tightly. But the other end of it, see, it fits in there nicely and it doesn't move around. So I think that would be fine. But that pin is not the right shape. It got worn down on that side of it. So that pin is part of the whole drive shaft assembly. You can't just replace any of those pieces. So I got thinking about it and I was like looking for a new drive shaft, and I'm having a hard time finding a new drive shaft because there's so many different ones. There's different lengths, there's different transmissions, different transfer cases, different motors. They're all different, like depending on what cab you have and all that. So I got thinking about it, and my dad has my old truck here, which is a 2003 Dodge Ram 2500 with a Hemi and an automatic transmission. And I didn't think that drive shaft would work, but when I measured, it did actually measure 32 inches from the end of the flange to the end of the flange. All the ones that I was looking at buying were either 34 or 36. And so I just thought, you know, I remember rebuilding this drive shaft a while ago. It's probably been like 6 years, but it's only had like 2 years of use since then. So here's the drive shaft off of that truck. And to get it off on this side, I couldn't get these couple of star head screws off. 2 of them just completely stripped out when I was trying to take them out. So I ended up having to cut this out. What I did is just make a couple cuts right here on the yoke on both sides. So you can see I kind of cut into the universal joint. So I figured I could just replace the universal joint and put this yoke on it to make this good. This drive shaft was sitting for a while because the truck is junked. So we kept it around for parts. So it was sitting in a field for a while, so it definitely has some rust on it. But I did replace these 2 universal joints. And The front one I never did, but it was still actually good. So I'm going to take it even a step further and see if I can actually just do this a little bit easier. I got the universal joint for this if I want to swap the yokes, but I'm thinking that maybe I can just pull apart these end pieces here and spline it into this one. So I'll take this whole assembly off and put it into this one. And that means that I'm going to have to take apart these crimp clamps here. Let's just see if we can make this look a lot better, because there's a lot of rust on here, but I think I can get it off pretty quickly with this wire cup here.
I always like to take this little tab right here and just bend it over, and then the thing will just pop right off of there.
So if you're trying to do a Frankenstein type drive shaft like this, just keep one thing in mind. Right here there's a flat spot, and that lets you sort of keep the balance, but we're swapping them out so it's not going to be balanced. But then on the yoke here, a slip yoke I guess you could call it, there's a flat spot that you can find right there. See, it's right there. That's the flat spot. So you can only put it one way. If you try to go any other way, it just won't go on. It'll seem like it tries to go on, but it doesn't. So when you put it with the flat spot to the flat spot, then it slips right on. So I got these boot clamps from Napa, and they either have a small or large. This is a small one. I'm pretty sure it'll work. Yeah, that'll work. Yep, that works good. This is just a PEX crimper. Alright, well, now this is ready to be put back in. You can see the holes don't line up. That's okay. I put the transfer case in neutral, so now I can just turn this output yoke to match up the bolt holes. Alright, so the last thing we got to do is fill this with fluid. So this is the drain plug, and this is the fill plug. So you need to fill it up until it starts coming out of that plug. So you can see the level. That's quite a bit of fluid to put in there. So I'm going to use ATF plus 4. Usually I get the 1 gallon containers, but the store I went to didn't have them, so I'm using quarts. So I'm going to use a pump that you have to pump out of the quarts into the transfer case. Alright, so let's go test drive this, and I'm going to check for leaks, as well as checking to make sure the 4-wheel drive is working good. I'm going to replace this little bushing that goes on the linkage where it meets the transfer case, because the old one is worn out. I took this off the other truck. I remember replacing this too, because the same exact thing happened. You can see this one's torn up pretty good. So I'm going to replace that and then go test drive this. Spin the 4-wheel drive. That was 4-wheel drive high. So let's try 4-wheel drive low. That was 4-wheel drive high. Let's try low. 4-wheel drive low. Let's get down. Alright, well that works pretty good. Never want to put it in while you're still slipping. 4-wheel drive works. Let's goose it a little bit, make sure it doesn't clunk at all. Alright, I think we're good. So the only thing we have left with this is just to make sure that it's not leaking. So over the next few days I'll do that, but I'm pretty sure it'll be okay. It's not under pressure, so it's not gonna like spray out or anything, but we'll see. So I'll keep a close eye on this transfer case. I cleaned it off with brake parts cleaner, make it nice and dry so that I can see a leak as it develops. I'm gonna check it every day for the next week, and then I'll check it every week for the next month. I'm pretty sure that the only reason it leaked is because whoever had it apart before, when they put it back together, they used black silicone and they did not let it set up before they torqued it down. So those flanges that you saw with nothing on them, I'm sure was the cause of that leak. Because I checked all the different seals. I checked those months ago. I couldn't find anything. But let this be a lesson to anybody who owns a truck that's four-wheel drive. You want to check that transfer case. Definitely want to check it. You also want to check the front and rear end too while you're at it. I think the thing to do to make it a pattern is just go ahead and check the transfer case, check the front and rear end, and grease up all the universal joints. Probably do it 4 times a year, you know, every 3 months or so. All the parts that I have into this is about $300 or less. That includes the fluid, the chain, the seals, the shipping for them, and also I didn't really have any cost in the front drive shaft because I took it out of that other truck over there. This is the old one that I had. And good thing we kept it around because I've used quite a bit of parts off of it. For any of you wondering why there's so much rust on the frame and everywhere else, it's because we live in an area where we have snow. So we have salt on the roads. It's a very unfortunate thing, but it is what it is. I've had to repair this frame. The whole thing is pretty much replaced already from rust. I was going to include fixing that oil leak in this video, but I have now discovered that that is a much bigger project than I thought. So I'm going to do that as a separate video, and I'll see you on that one.